Story 1. Something is coming to get me. It all started after I had that damn panic attack. I am a calm person by nature. Always have been. Small stuff never bothered me, even while driving, and I certainly had never been so negatively affected by something that I had a breakdown like that. Of all the places for it to happen. It was at work during an important meeting with my boss. Luckily for me, it was a telephone meeting, so I was able to hang up, get my breathing under control, and then call back, blaming my sudden absence on a bad connection. There had been no trigger to speak of. The meeting was going just fine. I was alone in my well-lit office, surrounded by plants and art, but something suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. No, more like the realization that there was a charging bear coming right for me. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Instinct is what my roommate called it when I confided in her later that evening after I shot down the possibility that I'd just been working too hard. Maybe it's like you knew that something was wrong. Animals can tell when something isn't right, like dogs and cats just before an earthquake, and human beings are just animals. When you get down to it, she had said before finishing off the last of her glass of wine. I sipped pensively at my own glass as I stared out the window of our penthouse apartment. Yeah, but human beings need science in order to tell when it's about to earthquake. I sigh. I guess that's true. Well, why your brain was just misfiring. Who knows? She left after chatting for a while longer to go meet her boyfriend at a bar across the city, leaving me alone in the apartment. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Everything was going just fine. I was rewatching an episode of Friends while I enjoyed my second glass of wine, but then, all of a sudden, that feeling hit again. Panic, worrying, dread all rolled into one uncomfortable sensation that caused my skin to crawl. Before I knew what I was doing, I was back in the kitchen looking for a knife or something to defend myself. But against what, I had no idea. After settling on me at tenderizer, I began to patrol the apartment, searching every room top to bottom. But of course, there was nothing to find. Because there was nothing wrong. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. After scolding myself back into a state of relative ease, I finished off the bottle of wine and another few episodes of television before turning in for the night. I sat up for a little while reading, as I always did before sleep, with my blinds closed to shield my room from the city lights. It was about 11:15 when I shut the book and turned out the lamp. The moment the light faded from the room, the panic returned with a vengeance, and once again I found my body moving before my mind would intervene. I threw open the blinds, allowing the city lights to pour in. But that did nothing to calm me down. As I stood there in the dim lighting, I could feel the anxiety focus in a little bit. Soon I had a pretty good idea what I was so scared of. Something was coming to get me. What or why I didn't know, but I knew it deep down in my DNA. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I didn't sleep that night, suffice to say. My roommate didn't return either, which didn't help, although she texted me later in the morning to inform me that she had spent the night at her boyfriend's. Around lunchtime, I decided it would be a good idea to go out so that at least I was surrounded by people and If anything happened, they could maybe help. How wrong I was. The moment I hit the streets, I felt more exposed than ever. I knew that whatever it was that was coming, it could come from any direction. He ground, the sky, left, right, behind and forward. Being in the open like this wasn't safe, but I also knew that my apartment wouldn't be much help, so I found myself moving towards the police station. I had no idea if they would help or even believe me. I knew that I wouldn't if I was them. But maybe they would agree to let me stay there or something. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Unfortunately, I was only halfway there when the feeling got so much worse. What had been anxious, worrying, and suspicion turned quickly into terror. Desperately, I swung my head back and forth to scan my surroundings. I was across from a park where a group of children was playing catch with their dad. Some old men were playing chess under a tree, and a busker on the road was strumming gently at an acoustic. I see guitar. Nobody around was threatening at all, but I knew in the back of my skull that it was getting closer, and it wouldn't be long until it arrived. I knew then that the police wouldn't help me, so I turned up street, kicked off my high heels, and began a full-on sprint to the downtown cathedral. People stared, some laughed, pointing at me. But none of that mattered, only survival did. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. As the tall spires of the church came into view down the street, I felt a small pang of relief and momentarily slowed my sprint to a jog. But that was short-lived, as an image fork ate its way through my eyeballs and into my mind. A grinning figure, tall, gaunt, wearing a bathrobe with a massive chest wound with protruding ribs. No, not ribs, fingers, big long fingers, reaching, catching, clutching fingers, the woman's, man's. Thing's lips were rotten and blistered with crusty yellow slime, and a few spots of the stuff stained its white bathrobe. Where it was I didn't know, but I knew it would be coming for me soon, so soon in fact that there was no point in running any more. I stopped in the street, hands slack at my side, and tilted my face up to the skyscrapers around me and the blue sky above them. Tears rolling down my face, I stood and still stand, waiting for it to get me. Story 2. Don't ever stop for the people on the shoulder. My name is Harrison, and I'm a long-haul trucker. While I sometimes get routes all over the place, my most common run is Vancouver to San Francisco. It's an easy trip most of the time with very little challenge involved. I tend to prefer driving into the night because there's less traffic. Of course, driving around in the middle of nowhere during witching hour means I've seen my share of shit, UFOs, Bigfoot, the works man. But none of that stuff has ever scared me near as bad as the people you see walking along the shoulder of the road far from civilization. Oddest, my first one on my junior run down south on the number 5. It was a lady in a blue summer dress, just strolling down the side of the highway underneath the full moon. Not a care in the world. Now we were on a stretch that was miles and miles away from anything in either direction, and I was the first vehicle on the road that she'd likely seen since dusk. She didn't even look up acknowledge me, though. Instead, she just kept on walking with a sort of vacant smile. I chalked it up to some hippie from the Oregon Trail hopped up on something from a nearby campsite and kept driving. But she was only the first. It's not every trip you spot them, but sometimes you see a few on a single go. It always struck me as strange because you never seem to see them during the day. Or maybe why. Who do, but they don't stick out as much under the sun. Even so, once you know they're there, you'll start noticing the hell out of them whenever you're driving far from civilization in the dark. The other truckers call them moon wanderers, but I prefer shoulder walkers, since that's always where they are. Almost like trains on a track, they walk that little white line to wherever they're going. They're different shapes and sizes too. Men, women, tall, fat, ugly, pretty, just folks like you'd see anywhere. Sure, they're creepy, but for a long time I didn't pay them any mind beyond noticing them on occasion in the split second that they were visible as I cruised past. But one night a few months ago, I passed by what looked like an old lady. She was in a hospital gown and looked just like someone on death row, sunken, given up on life sort of eyes, frizzy white hair and pale skin. She was smiling just like her grandkids had called her name. Her pace was a slow huffle along the shoulder, and just looking at her I could imagine the sound of her hospital slippers running just over top the gravelly road. I wanted to keep driving because, well, to be honest, she gave me the willies, but hell, she reminded me of my own sweet grandma, God rest her soul. So I brought my rig to a slow stop and, collecting up the flashlight I keep in my glove box, stepped out of the cab. I could hear her coming before I could see her as I'd driven a few meters ahead of her due to the long stop time. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I could visualize her wrinkly feet in those SE hospital slippers, shuffling ever onward. Quickly I checked the Maps app on my phone and saw that the closest town to where we were was over 50 miles. No way this old lady was walking that. Putting my phone in my jeans, I held up my flashlight and started walking towards the sound of her footfalls. Hello, ma'am. I called out, hoping that she would speak up. No such luck, just more scraping. My hairs were on edge now as I waited for her to enter. Into the dim light of my flashlight I nearly cried out as her ghostly appearance came into view. Not because anything was different from before, just because she looked so much more sickly up close. Ma'am, are you okay? You're in the middle of nowhere. You know, she didn't say nothing, just kept smiling and moving steadily forward. Now my heart was beating hard. She's just senile, and she needs my help, I thought out loud. But my feet were frozen in place. They were going back to the truck or they weren't moving at all. She was getting closer, though, and as she reached within 10 feet or so, her wrinkled hands began to reach slowly up. Her fingers wiggled in my direction like a grandma reaching for her grandchild's face. She opened her mouth, but didn't say anything, just grinned at me with pale gums. Fuck. I stammered as my legs gave out. As I fell onto my side, she reached down for me with surprising speed and dexterity. Before I knew what was going on, she had her bony fingers around my ankles, and my ass was getting dragged down the road. Desperately I pulled back, but her grip was superhuman, and the addition of my weight didn't seem to slow her walk in the least. She stared down at me with those beady, sunken eyes, mouth agape in a smile. I kicked at her with all the fight I had in me, and luckily connected with her jaw. To my horror, it was like kicking solid concrete. But luckily she let go despite having no visible injury. I crawled backwards towards the middle of the road, and she kept walking down the shoulder. Her hands fell back down to her side, and her mouth closed into a tight-lipped smile. But her gaze stayed locked on mine as she slowly shuffled out. Of my flashlight's beam I waited as the scraping, bit by bit, faded from my ears, and after what ended up being a half-hour of stunned silence, I worked up the nerve to get up and go back to my rig. No sign of the lady, but when I climbed into my cab and sped down the highway, it didn't take long to catch up with her. Her eyes were still stuck on me. They probably had been the whole time as she walked away. The last that I saw of her as I gunned it away was her thin, chapped, smirking lips. That shit fucked me up for a long time. According to some other guys I know, I'm the first to try and interact with a shoulder walker, and if God is good, I'll be the last. Since then I've seen plenty more strolling down the highway in the pitch dark. I even saw a kid once, but there ain't no way I'm ever stopping again for them, and if you're smart, you won't neither. The really fucked up thing is that since that night, the shoulder walkers are always looking right at me when I drive, past which they never used to do. Almost like since that old lady saw me, they all did. I'd hate to think what would have happened if I'd not managed to get free, but I can rest easy, KN. Owing I've put my warning out there in public, maybe I'll save a few folks with this story. Here's hoping. Right, story 3. My coworker showed up for his opening shift the day after his funeral. THIS happened to me a few years ago when I was working for a small-time administration office as a security guard. The building had just been purchased by the company and was in a sad state of disrepair, so while there were no actual employees working in the building at the time, we had to be there to oversee some of the contractors that were working on the place. It was a small team consisting of Jake, Miguel, and myself. While we didn't know each other prior to working there, the long hours meant that we got to know each other pretty quickly. Jake would tell us about his wife and kids, and Miguel would talk about his life growing up in Colombia. All in all, they were really cool guys. Heck, we even met up for beers on the weekend sometimes. It has 6 days to Christmas Day, and Miguel and I received a call from head office. They told us that Jake wouldn't be coming in because he had been taken to the hospital the previous night with chest pains. Since he was only in his early 30s, Miguel and I assumed it was just a panic attack or something. But then later that day we got the news that he had passed away at the hospital from a massive heart attack. The rest of the day was glum, to say the least. We asked if we could go home early, as we both had become close to Jay, but we were told to stay until the plumber left. 2 days later I called Jake's house looking for funeral information. The day after that, both Miguel and I carpooled to the church to attend. The ceremony was deeply Catholic, which was a little strange and foreign to me since I've always been an atheist, but Miguel seemed to be right at home, so I kept it to myself. When the funeral was over, we went to the graveyard and watched them lower Jake's casket into the ground. Then, after giving out condolences to his grieving widow and children, returned home. That night I had trouble sleeping. I always do when I drank heavily before hitting the hay. Weirdly, I kept having dreams about our weekend bar visits with Jake, and even though everything about it was normal, Jake included, I knew in the back of my mind he was D, and therefore the whole situation was wrong, as if to assure me that everything was fine. In the dreams, Jake was super attentive to me. What's wrong? You don't look so well. He would say asterisk, 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 asterisk. The next day I considered phoning in sick due to the hangover, but decided against it because I got word that Miguel had already called to say he would be staying home. I knew that security guards were easy to come by in the current economy, so I went in to save face. With Christmas drawing near, there was unlikely to be any workers scheduled to come in, so I stopped for a coffee on my way. When I arrived, I was surprised to find another car in the massive parking lot. It was snowing pretty hard, so I didn't get a good look at it until I parked myself and approached the building. It was Jake's car. Even though it was strange, I shrug it off. After all, I figured it was just Jake's wife, maybe here to collect some of his work things. Through the haze of the hangover, that seemed as likely as anything. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. But when I found the building locked up tight, I did steal a glance back at the car before pushing into the main entryway. It was dark as all the lights were off except for an exit sign which cast a red glow over the scaffolding and tools strewn about. I moved behind the security desk and booted up the system so I could take a cursory look at the cameras. While it booted up, I took my jacket off and hung it up on the back of my chair and began to sip at my coffee. Once the 10 different views popped up on the screen, I began to scrutinize them one at a time. About halfway through the various views, something moved onto the last camera sites and then quickly out again, and I barely caught it out of the corner of my eye. The last camera was set up in our shipping and receiving warehouse at the back of the building, which was a small trek down a long hallway with no windows or doors, and around a corner. Sighing, I got up and, turning the light system on, journeyed down the hallway with my coffee in hand. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The shipping room was a total mess from all the construction garbage that they had been loading into dumpsters in the back of the building, and there was less light due to the reliance on the large windows and the dreary morning. I moved in a full circle around the room, looking for a raccoon or something that may have slipped in to get out of the cold. But what I found was a whole lot of nothing, and a microwave the workers had set up for reheating air lunches. Hello, I called out for good measure. Mrs. Calloway, I added, in case it was Jake's wife. When there was no answer, I was about to turn around and leave when I heard footsteps coming towards me down the long hallway. Thinking that it must be a worker or maybe Jake's wife answering my call out, I moved back that way. As I reached the end of the shipping and receiving doors, a figure moved around the corner from the long hallway. I couldn't believe my eyes, and neither could my hands apparently, as the coffee just slipped right out from my grasp, splashing the hot liquid lines over my sneakers. There, standing in his security uniform, was Jake. He was pale even without the help of harsh fluorescent light, and his normally bright blue eyes were glazed over and unfocused. I opened my mouth to make a noise of astonishment, but my voice caught in my throat as his mouth fell open. His tongue lolled down over his bluish lips, wiggling like a worm, and his eyes suddenly snapped to focus on me. "What's wrong?" he slurred like a drunk man. I began to tremble and instinctively move backwards as the smell of rot and compost hit my nose. "Yeah." Kay's tongue retracted slowly back into his mouth as his face began to droop on the right side, his nostrils flaring up to triple their normal size. "You don't look well," he stammered in a desperate, almost yelling tone as he took a shaky step towards me. Jake, you're dead," was all I could manage in a shaky whisper. "What's wrong?" he asked again, taking another shaky step as his face began to droop more and more. I tried to scream, but it came out as a low groan as Jake drew closer, his face looking more like a loose-fitting Halloween mask than an actual face. He reached his hand out for me as if to embrace me in a hug as he gargled, "You don't look so well." I ducked as his hands closed in and sprinted past him and out of the room, although I didn't look back until I was in my car and speeding away. The whole way down that hallway I could hear his voice as if it was right behind me. "What's wrong? You don't look so well." Asterisk, 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 asterisk. I quit the job that night and advised Miguel to do the same. When I looked into it, I discovered that Jake's grave was untouched and that his car had never left the driveway where he left it at home. I still don't know what he would have done if he had grabbed me. After all, we were good buddies, and I can't imagine that he would do anything to hurt me. I worry to this day that he was actual. Why, the one in pain, scared, just reaching out for a familiar face. But I don't regret running. I've made it a habit of leaving flowers on his grave every year around Christmas time, generally the day after I have that same dream of the three of us back in the bar. While seeing him every year like that makes me uneasy, I'm just happy that his face is back to normal. Story for the ones who sleep alone. During my junior year of college, I was on a bit of a bender. My high school girlfriend finally called it quits for the third time, and the lure of the one-night stand caught in the sweaty mist of beer and pee. Perfume was too much for my angry brain to withstand. I was a decent-looking guy back then, built tall and broad, with pale eyes that more than one girl compared to sea foam. I also carried a forlow and look about me that was not entirely calculated, and so it took minimal effort for my reptilian brain to wire the right coordinates towards the triangular patch so coveted by many. In other words, I was a bit of a dashabag. Time blurs the journey from cocky frat boy to settled husband, and I can't outline all the steps for you, but there was perhaps one night that stood out amongst the others. It was a Friday or Thursday, I can't recall, but I was attending some smoke-filled stage on Halloween night where the lights dim the caked-out flesh and smooth them into blank faces and bodies. I had met a girl, a nice slip of a thing with purple-dyed hair and thick mascara to match. But underneath all the clownery, I could see she was beautiful, and that intrigued me. Sometimes you get sometimes you get cute or fine, but you rarely get beautiful. The night had ended, and I generously agreed to walk her back to her home. That was odd, I remember that as he lived with her parents, who happened to be near campus. But no matter. Arm in arm we swayed through the peaking lights, her one arm settled so lightly on mine. "Bethany," she had whispered in my ear, and my swoony brain tried to keep this name midair. At some point we redirected ourselves, had conveniently or placed outside of my single. I glanced over at Bethany and realized with some annoyance that she was in no state for shenanigans. No, though her eyes were bright with drink and adrenaline, her head was drooping down. Fine. Be it as it may, I was a bit of a dasha bag, but I was not a rapist. I tried to get her to tell me where she lived, but she was starting to doze, and so we found ourselves in my bedroom at 2 a.m. Good intentions, I swear. The buzz was wearing off on me too, and I was settling on a futon while the girl was safely in my box spring twin. Classy guy that I was. I had only dozed for perhaps a minute when I jolted awake. I glanced up to see Bethany sitting upright, combing her hair back with her fingers and muttering something to herself. I jumped up and sat on the bed, still safely away, out taking a temperature of the mood. "Hey, you okay?" "Can't sleep," she said, which seemed incongruent with her state 5 minutes ago. "Can you stay up with me?" There was something in her voice, timid like a child knocking on her parent's door, which indicated the night would not take me the way I was hoping. Fair enough, I had snipped that cord of hope well before we even set foot inside the apartment. But what was this now about staying up with her? "What do you want to do?" I asked. Her silence was prolonged and awkward. Through the dim light I could just see her features, delicate with hair hanging down her face, beautiful, remember, but also young and scared, and she reminded me a bit of my sister. There was a game we used to play called the 100 Lights, and perhaps inspired by this I offered this option. We could tell each other ghost stories. Bethany glanced at me. "What do you mean?" I shrugged, a bit embarrassed already, just something my sister and I used to do when we were kids. We called it the 100 Stories, based on an old story. You were supposed to light 100 candles and take turns telling stories. After each story, you extinguished a candle, so that by the end, you were in pitch darkness. Then a real ghost was supposed to come, my paramour not to be glanced around. Well, where would we get 100 candles? I laughed. Well, obviously we didn't light any candles, but we improvised. We could start with the bathroom light, for example, then the desk lamp, and the overhead light, and so on. Kind of a fun way to end the night. No, and in the spirit of Halloween, okay, but on one condition. Bethany looked away. "You have to draw the curtains tight." It was a bit odd, but it made sense, I suppose. I flicked on all the lights in my bedroom and drew the curtains tight over the window, guaranteeing pitch blackness when all was done. As I jolted the curtains shut, I glanced at 2 lampposts shining dimly in the misty night air. Below, shadows flickered, and I shivered, thinking about what might be out there. Somewhat invigorated by this new game, I launched into the first story, a classic about a boy who finds a tale and learns of the creature that it belonged to. After finishing it, I stood up and flicked off the light to the living room outside. The room was still bright, and Bethany, who was looking as sober as ever, smiled at me. Her story was refreshingly creepy, about a demonic cat that slowly killed all family members, one by one. I couldn't ever recall hearing it before. Upon finishing, she stood up, and walked over to my desk lamp, shutting it off. As she walked by, I caught a whiff of her perfume and I marveled at how the theme of the night shifted so much might turn a story about vampy race in a small town. I kind of cheated as it was based on one of my favorite stories by one of my favorite authors. Then Bethany went and told a weird story about a ghost that swallowed people's souls and turned them into lunatics. The details of this story escape me, but I remember it was more weird than scary. I finished my next story and was just about to turn off the last light, which hung over the bedroom, when Bethany pointed to my DVD player, still glimmering its time in the dimming room that first. Somewhat chagrined at being told about my own game, I comply. Bethany launched into yet another story about a giant who rose from the earth and killed a small boy. Much detail went into vivid descriptions of rending flesh and splattered guts, and if it were bright enough, she would have seen my mouth hung open. Okay, I started when she finished and moved towards the final light, but her head shook again like a sudden blur. She pointed to my cell phone. Oh, the blinking light. She wanted it off. A sense of dread crept down my spine, but I shook it off. Wasn't this just some random party girl I picked up? We were playing some weird children's game, true, but I came up with it, not her. Somewhat impressed by her dedication, I switched my cell off. My turn? I told a quick, almost banal story about nothing much at all, just to get it over with. Then, as an almost act of defiance mixed with humor, I went to my kitchen and unplugged the fridge. There, I thought with satisfaction. Two can play at this game. There was just one light left, and it was Bethany's turn. The overhead light in the bedroom cast a faint glow over her features. In a low monotone, she launched into it. Once there was a young girl who was never allowed to leave the home. Her parents were very strict and enforced a curfew every night, thinking that her parents just had old-fashioned values, which may have stemmed from her older brother's untimely suicide. Years ago, this girl began to rebel in high school. She would stay out longer and test her parents' limits, finally electing to spend one night locked in her science lab at school. When she woke up the next day, she opened the door to find her father waiting for her. To her surprise and somewhat horror, he had tears in her eyes. "Tad, what is it?" the girl said. "Honey, it's time you knew." The father explained to the daughter that the reason they never let her spend the night away from home was because of what happened to the girl while she slept. You see, there was a curse in this girl's family, passed from generation to generation. The women in the family, when they fell asleep, they changed. The girl asked her faith. What do you mean changed? We never really know what it is like when we sleep, do we? Even in the presence of others, when we sleep we are unaware of ourselves. Maybe we all briefly change, matter changing into something else. How do we know we are asleep? But the father continued, some of us change for longer than that. We change into things that beget unspeakable horrors. The girl laughed. Are you implying that when I fall asleep, I turn into some kind of monster, like a Medusa? I only wish, her father said. We know what Medusa looks like. This is something more, something that has no words. At that point, he began to weep loudly, and for a second the girl's incredulity was briefly shaken. She, of course, began to experiment. She set up a video camera at night, but every night, like clockwork, she would turn off the camera right before she fell asleep. She never remembered this, mind you. She just watched herself the next day get up and move over and hit the off button. It was as if whatever lived in her had a desire to survive and so ensured it would never be caught. It was then the girl began to believe her father. One night, before bed, she knocked on his door. As she walked in, like a light bulb, she realized that her parents might sleep separately for reasons other than what she assumed. Have you ever seen Mom change? Her father looked at her with wide eyes. No, he whispered, but your brother did. The girl never again stayed away from her parents' home. She always ensured she was in bed like clockwork at a reasonable hour, away from the eyes of others, and so all were safe. As the story ended, Bethany looked at me wordlessly. She got up and flicked the last switch off. The room plummeted into a deep darkness. Nice story, I wanted to say, but I found myself unable to speak. Bethany was silent, and I heard her yawn and lie down. Within a minute rode the rhythmic breathing of her slumber. I sat immobile in the dark. Somehow the darkness seemed to deepen around the direction of my bed. I heard muffled breathing that grew deeper and coarser, and felt something stir where Bethany was lying. It rustled and moved slowly in my direction. I wanted to move. I wanted to scream then, but nothing would come out. The rustling grew louder, and I felt the sheets of the bed slide off. And then, just as abruptly, the rustling slowed and stopped. The coarse breathing also abruptly ended. There was dead silence. My hand twitched towards the light switch, but I otherwise sat still. It would be hours until morning. Story 5. Babysitting on Halloween. Pound 25 an hour to look after 2 little children. I wasn't going to turn that down. It was Halloween night, and I had grown out of it. But it didn't stop their parents from going to a Halloween party of their own. I followed Janet upstairs. She whispered as she opened the door to Bobby's room. That's Bobby. He won't cause you any trouble. He sleeps through the night. I squinted to see the boy who lay in almost darkness in the bed. She closed the door quietly, the only sound the click of the barrel engaging with the lock. This is Alice, she said as we entered her room. She was still awake. This is Helen. She's going to look after you tonight. I knelt down next to her. The sheets were pulled up to her face. Hey, Alice, I soothed, stroking her hair gently. I looked around the room. Wow, you really like your dolls. She nodded. The whole room was decorated with them. At least 100. I didn't want to tell her they freaked me out. They look amazing. She smiled. Alice's mom gestured for us to leave. Good night, Alice, I said as the door was closed behind us. Thank you so much for doing this at such short notice. You came to us with such a good recommendation. I must say Alice is a little cling. Why, we don't get out that often. That's okay. I had a younger sister myself. She was a real pain, too. Have you tried leaving her with family? We don't have much. Just my mother, and she's a little senile now. It's too much of a risk to leave Alice alone with her. We need to get going. I heard Alice's father shout from the bottom of the stairs. Call me. NG, Janet said quietly. We will see you around 1 a.m. I hope that's still okay. Yes, that's fine. I sat in the living room as Alice's parents raced around the downstairs putting the finishing touches to their costumes. See you later, Janet said. The dad hovered for a moment as if conflicted. Alice, he said before stopping. She's a little different. She likes to make things up. We're going to be late, Janet hollered from outside. Be careful, he said, closing the door behind him. I flinched as I heard the key turn in the lock. I pulled the deadbolt shut. The house was suddenly silent. I waited for the sounds of the car door closing and the vehicle leaving, but it didn't, and unease filled me. I sat on the couch in the living room, dimly lit by a small lamp that stood in the corner. It sent elongated shadows that projected onto the surfaces of the furniture. I checked my Twitter feed for a bit, feeling at a loose end. There was a knock at the door. It startled me. I got up and checked the spy hole, expecting one of the parents had forgotten something. Instead, a small boy stood there. I placed my phone on the table in the entryway and picked up the bowl of sweets, then unlocked the door. I squatted down. Hello there, would you like some candy? I thrust the bowl out in front of him. He took a second to look down, and then his gaze returned to mine. He violently shook his head. Okay, where are your parents? He stood in silence. In a whisper, he asked, Can I come in? I don't know who you are. Sorry. Do you need me to call someone? I turned to pick up my phone. Do you know your parents' number? I asked. When I turned back, the boy was gone. I swiftly shut the door and scanned the house. I wondered if the child had rushed inside when I wasn't looking. I returned to the couch, wary that an intruder might be in the house. Before I could get back to my phone, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Alice emerged. I'm scared, she said. I saw the growing dark patch in her pajamas. Oh, honey? It's okay, I said, jumping out of my seat and running over to hug her. What happened, Bobby? She said. I stepped back. Did he come into your room? She nodded. Let's get you cleaned up. I took her hand and led her upstairs. Her door was ajar. Where are your clean clothes? I asked. She pointed to the dresser, barely lit by the landing light. I opened the drawers, one at a time, until I found some clean pajamas. Where are the towels? She pointed to the bathroom. I entered and picked up a clean towel that rested on a radiator. The fabric was warm to the touch. I cleaned her off and she got into her fresh clothes. Her bed sheets were dry, so I put her back to bed. Are you okay now? She nodded. I stayed for a moment, stroking her hair. My eyes drifted to the dolls. All of them were facing the walls, Alice. Why are the dolls facing the other way? They were scared, too. I noticed my pulse had increased and a slight clammy wetness had gathered on my brow. I pretended I was fine. Are they scared now? She shook her head. Can I turn them back round? She nodded again. One by one I turned the dolls. Not by their heads, Alice said, slightly annoyed. I don't know if it was her tone or the fact she saw them as other than inanimate objects, but I relented. I picked them up by their dresses, carefully putting them back into place. When I finished, Alice spoke. Can I have Jilly? She asked. Which one's Jilly? She pointed to one in the corner. Its dress was threadbare and the hair was falling out. Are you sure you want that one and not this one? I picked up a really nice-looking one in a pink dress. She shook her head. I gave her the dolly. She held it tight, and before I knew it, she was sleeping again. I picked up the soiled clothes, smelling the familiar scent of ammonia. The pajamas were damp. I closed the door and then peeked into Bobby's room. He was fast asleep, just like when I saw him earlier. I jumped as I heard the door to Alice's room violently shake. I dropped the cloth and opened the door. Alice was fast asleep. My heart was racing. An ice-cold chill tingled down my spine as I saw all the dolls were facing the wall again. Jilly Na sat on top of Alice's tall chest of drawers, peering into the room, way too high for Alice to have put there. "Alice," I said in a hushed tone. All I heard was an ever-so-slight snore. I contemplated turning the dolls back again, but didn't. They scared me. On edge, I closed the door, feeling all the more alone. As I descended the stairs, I heard another knock at the door. I picked up the candy bee owl and unlocked. An old woman stood there. "Who are you?" she asked politely. "I'm Helen. What are you doing in my house?" "I am sorry," I questioned. "Who are you?" "I'm Eunice, Alice's grandmother." I remembered what Janet told Emmy. "Hi, Eunice. Could you let me in?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea. Do her parents know you're visiting?" "I'm not visiting," she said, upset. "I really cannot let you in. Alice is in trouble," she said. "She's fine. She's sleeping upstairs." "No, her brother line's dry and hurt her. I think I've got this." She moved towards the door and I slammed it in her face. As soon as I did, I felt a pang of remorse. I double-locked the door and peered through the spy hole. She still stood there. I picked up my phone and dialed Janet's number. I jumped as I heard a ringtone from inside the house. I kept the call open, searching the house for the ringing phone. I saw the bright phone lit up in the kitchen as it went to answer phone. I hung up. I checked Janet's phone to see many missed calls from Mother. A large bang reverberated through the house. It came from upstairs. I dropped the phone and ran. Alice's door was open. I rushed inside to see her eyes wide open. Her bed was covered in dolls. "What's happened, Bobby?" she said, between gasps. "What about him?" He came into my room. "It's okay. He's your brother. What's wrong?" "He's under my bed." All the dolls were sat facing Alice. She couldn't have done this herself and gotten into bed. I knelt down and peered under. I jumped when I saw a pair of eyes stare back at me. It was Jilly. "It's only Jilly," I said, picking her up and giving her to Alice. She shook her head before hugging it tightly. Apprehensively, I returned my gaze. There was something else under there, breathing heavily. "Bobby?" I asked. Another set of eyes opened. My body numb, petrified. I asked again, "Bobby, is that you?" He nodded. "Why is she scared of me?" "I don't know," I said, lifting my head up. "Why are you scared of Bobby?" She began to cry. I looked under again. "Will you come out?" He wasn't there. I ran into his room and turned on his light. He was still asleep in his bed. "Bobby?" I asked, knowing I didn't want to know the answer. Gently, I pulled back the sheets. He didn't move. I placed my hand on his shoulder and turned him onto his back. I screamed. I heard footsteps rush up the stairs. "You saw him, didn't you?" Janet asked from the landing, her eyes pregnant with tears. I stood there, my lip quivering. "She saw him? Harold, you did?" the father asked. Janet held her hands together in delight. I stole a final look at the mummified body in the bed. "What did he say?" I said nothing. "Helen, please tell us. Why is Alice scared of him?" Alice saw him. They rushed into her room. I didn't know what to do. Why were they here? What the fuck was in the bed? Janet shrieked. As if pulled out of a daze, I ran into Alice's room. The dolls were gone, and so was Alice. Where is she? Janet shouted at me. I don't know. She was here a minute ago. I was just in here. What did you do to her? Why are her pajamas on the floor? Harold. Blasted. She wet herself, I said in defense. Bullshit. I ran down the stairs and stopped as I looked in the living room. Eunice was sitting on the couch, stroking Alice's hair. All the dolls were spread out arrow on the living room, all pointing to look at Alice. Don't run away from me, Harold said, plunging down the stairs. He stopped too. Janet, she's here. He pushed past me and into the living room. Stop, Eunice said, putting her arm around Alice. What are you doing here, protecting her from Bobby? Janet arrived, and her anger subsided. Hello, honey, she said, creeping into the living room. You have to get rid of that thing. Up there, Mother, he's only sleeping. No, he isn't, Eunice said. He's dead. That to move past this, my gaze was drawn to the corner of the room. I saw a scared little boy shake. Do you see him now? Janet tasked me expectantly. Bobby began to cry and shook his head violently. I copied him, I think. It's best you leave, Harold said. I picked up my coat, my hand shaking, trying to unlock the door. Calmly, he placed his hand on mine. Taking the key, he opened the door. Here, he asked, handing me a large wad of cash. It was at last 500 pounds. Please, don't mention what happened tonight. I nodded and ran for my car. I locked the doors as soon as I got in. I jumped when I saw a little boy stand next to the window. I opened it. Hi, Bobby, I said in a whisper. He asked, Can I come in? I shook my head as a single tear rolled down my cheek. Be a good boy, will you? He nodded. I pulled away, looking in the rear view to see an empty street. Story 6. I don't experience Thursdays. I've had this problem for as long as I can remember. In preschool, I remember being confused when they told us there were 7 days in a week, because I could only ever count 6. I've never told anyone this, not even my wife, so I've never really been able to ask, but I can gather from careful questions that the me they see on Thursdays acts the exact same way and says the same general things I would. If plans are made for Thursdays, I show up and do exactly what I will. Do I just don't ever remember it. Before you ask, yes, I've tried staying up all Wednesday night or waking up in the middle of the night. It never works. I wake up in my bed on Friday. I feel sorry for the Thursday me. He's never going to have a weekend. I worked it out, and he only has Christmas once every 7 years or so. It's not fair that I get to have so much more life than him. One thing I do know is he doesn't like to keep a diary. If anyone ever goes through my journal, I wonder if they'll notice I've never made an entry for Thursday. In all these years, I wish the Thursday me would write sometimes. If he did, I'd be able to figure out once and for all whether he's really a separate person or if he's just an unconscious me or anything. Last week I decided I would give him a break. I took Thursday off. I went to bed on Wednesday, and I hoped Thursday me would make the most of it. Friday I woke up and got ready for work. There was a very strange smell in the kitchen. It was an oily, burnt smell. It made me feel like something was sticking to my skin. I sprayed some air freshener and took out the garbage without investigating it. Before I left, my wife came out of the bedroom in her pajamas and hugged me deeply. "Hey, what's this about?" I said. "You don't normally wake up this early to say goodbye to me. I just wanted to thank you for the wonderful dinner you made last night." She said, "What did you say that dish was called?" "It was incredible. I don't remember. Honestly, I just flipped open my mom's cookbook to a random page. I'll have to look it up again this afternoon." She kissed me. Her breath smelled like the kitchen. "Well, whatever it was, figure it out and make it again soon. I love you so much." "Love you, too," I said at work. Everyone was happy to see me. Richie, the guy who works next door to my cubicle, slapped me on the back. "That was an amazing party last night, buddy." My supervisor, Helen, dropped by my desk. "If you're going to throw a get-together like that every time, then you can take off as many days as you'd like. I can't believe how much I ate." There was a big greasy stain on her blouse. It looked like she'd been wearing a messy bib. As the day went on, more and more people thanked me and shook my hand and asked me where I'd learned to cook like that. There were people I never even talked to, like the janitors and the security guys. Toward the end of the day, a woman I had never seen before spoke to me. I could see from her ID badge that she was a secretary from our other facility across town. She said, "I've always thought I was an adventurous eater, but after last night, wow, I'd never eaten anything like that before." "What did you say that dish was called?" She had a black glob stuck between her teeth. I said, "I can't believe I don't remember. It was in my cookbook. Lines have to look it up and get back to you. Please do." By the end of the day, I hadn't gotten a bit of work done. So many people, strangers, had talked to me. I was completely overwhelmed. As I drove home, I almost expected a cop to pull me over and asked me what I had cooked last night. I had to figure out what it was. When I got home, I went into the alley behind my house and opened up the garbage can. The smell was so powerful I started gagging. It was like nothing I'd ever smelled before, greasy, burnt, and metallic. It made me sick, but at the same time, it was appealing, almost addicting. As I sorted through the trash, it seemed like I was breathing deeper, trying to get more. All the scraps were covered in black globs like the secretary had had between her teeth. The globs stuck to me as I wiped them off the long curved bones and fleshy sacks I pulled out of the garbage bag. One of the things I pulled out looked like a tiny human hand, an inch across, with two thumbs on one side. It was held together with fibrous connective tissue. I touched one frayed tendon dangling from its wrist, and it clenched into a tight fist I couldn't open again. I picked something up which Washington S. unmistakably a skull, 2 inches across, with shards of gray, fatty meat still clinging to its face. But its single eye socket was completely clean, like someone had sucked it dry with a long tongue. Its jaw was too narrow and locked open, like it was screaming. I found a tentacle filled with bubbles of black liquid that, if I touched them, would burst and evaporate instantly. I found a strip of skin, bright red with grill marks on one side and covered in gray hairs that were stretchy like rubber and needle-sharp at the tip. I couldn't take it anymore. I vomited. I left a pile of refuse and the overturned garbage can in the alley and ran upstairs through the back door. I washed my hands in the bathroom because the smell was still in the kitchen. I came into the living room and my wife smiled at me. I could smell it on her. "I'm starving, honey," she said. "I haven't eaten all day. I'm waiting to see what you make for us, Tony." Kitty. I could only laugh unconvincingly in response. I went into the bedroom. My journal was open on the nightstand, open to Thursday's entry. "Thank you so much for this opportunity, old friend. I'll take more days next week." Story 7, Reign of Terror. "Look, Daddy," Erin exclaimed in her squeaky voice that Dane always found so endearing. "See how high up Kevin's kite is." "I see it, Princess," Dane replied with a smile. "He better be careful. If it goes any higher, it's going to end up in outer space." Erin laughed at the comment and continued to watch Kevin fly his kite. Dane watched both of them for a moment and felt an incredible sadness well up inside him when he thought about how things were about to change for everyone. "Are you sure we can't work through this?" he asked in a soft tone, not wanting the kids to hear. "I'm positive neither one of us is happy, and I really don't see things ever getting any better," Cheryl answered, looking like she was about to start crying. "I just think that it's better for everyone if we just went our separate ways." He wanted to tell her that she was wrong and that they could get through everything together. He wanted to tell her that he still loved her and that he didn't want their marriage of almost 13 years to come to an end. He wanted to tell her that he didn't want to put the kids through the torment of having to see their parents get a divorce. He wanted to tell her that he didn't think that he could go on without having her in his life. He wanted to tell her a lot of things, but instead he kept his mouth shut and just sat there trying to accept everything without breaking down and crying. He glanced over at Kevin and Erin as they continued to fly the kite and wondered how they would react to the news that their parents were calling it quits. He thought that since Erin was only 6, she wouldn't quite understand why they were splitting up, and hoped that Kevin could help her cope with everything. He was a great big brother and was very mature for his age, so Dane was pretty sure that he would help take care of his little sister and do his best to make her understand. "When should we break the news to them?" Cheryl asked, almost as if she had read his mind. "I don't know," he sighed, looking up at the sky. "I just don't know." "Well, we better decide. We're going to have to tell them sooner or later, and I just want to get it over with. Double quotes, right? I think it's only fair that you are the one to tell them, since this whole thing is your idea." She started to say something, but was interrupted by a loud crash of thunder. It was so loud that Dane jumped, and a couple of cries of horror came from some of the people playing volleyball. Since Erin was terrified of storms, Dane looked over at her to make sure that she was okay, and saw that she had a worried look on her face. He started to get up to comfort her, but didn't have to, as Kevin put his arm around her and attempted to calm her with some soothing words. Yes, Kevin really was a great big brother. A huge streak of lightning lit up the sky and caught a skinny teenage boy with greasy hair and bad skin, who was skateboarding down the sidewalk, to curse loudly. The sky started to grow dark, and Dane got up from the picnic table as he figured he was about to be caught in a downpour, and he wanted to get everyone to the car before it started so they wouldn't get drenched. Part of Dane was happy that it was about to storm, since it meant the conversation he was having with Cheryl would have to be postponed until a later time. Still, he couldn't help but wonder why the weather had changed so suddenly in just a matter of moments. It just didn't seem natural to him. When they arrived at the park, it was nice and sunny, making it a perfect day for a picnic. It was supposed to be nice and warm all weekend, but he guessed the weather guy had just gotten it wrong. As usual, the wind started to pick up, blowing paper plates and plastic cups off several picnic tables. As the thunder and lightning became more frequent, the people playing volleyball decided to call off their game and began to make their way off of the court. The foul-mouthed kid on the skateboard and his pals started to head home as well. As the sky began to turn a weird yellowish-green color that made the hair on Dane's arms stand on end, he just had a feeling that something wasn't right, and all he wanted to do was to get his family together and get home where they would be safe before he could tell Aaron and Kevin that it was time to go. The rain and the screaming began. Dane knew it wasn't ordinary precipitation when he saw it. Sure, Kevin's kite, instead of beads of water, shards of glass poured from the sky, jagged shards of glass that cut and stabbed anything and anyone they touched. "What's happening?" Cheryl screamed as they both stood there helplessly watching, refusing to believe what they were seeing. "I don't know," he replied, closing his eyes as the glass showered the skater kid and his buddies, tearing them all to shreds. "We have to," Cheryl began, but she never got the chance to finish as a large shard fell from the sky and lodged itself in the top of her head with such impact that the jagged point came out of her chin. Dane didn't have time to grieve for her death, as he was too busy trying to dodge all the glass falling from the heavens, but he absently thought to himself that at least he wouldn't have to break the news to the kids that their parents were getting a divorce anymore. There were dead bodies everywhere, and the grass was stained red with blood. Severed body parts were strewn every which way, and Dane nearly tripped over a still twitching leg that was wearing half a pair of blue Chuck Taylor All-Stars as he tried to make his way toward where Kevin and Aaron were. Many people were rushing to a nearby pavilion where they were shielded from the rain, and the ones that managed to make it there safely started screaming for Dane to join them, but he ignored them. At the moment, his own personal well-being was the last thing on his mind, and all he wanted to do was get to his kids and make sure that they got to safety. He was being cut to ribbons as the glass sliced his flesh, and blood from a nasty wound on his head was running into his eyes, but he was still able to see Kevin lying on top of Aaron to protect her. Always the good big brother. He knew that Kevin was dead before he even touched him. There were several shards protruding from his back, the back of his head, and his arms and legs, making him look like a porcupine with glass quills. Blood pooled beneath him, and Dane was terrified to roll him over for fear of what condition Aaron might be in underneath. He took a deep breath and moved his son's dead body, trying his best to ignore Kevin's condition. Aaron was completely soaked in blood, and Dane felt his heart sink until he noticed that she was still breathing. She was lying face down and sobbing uncontrollably, so he scooped her up quickly and attempted to make a run to the safety of the covered pavilion. Aaron was hysterical and started screaming in his ear, but he did his best to ignore it as he darted across the park. Unfortunately, they didn't make it far, as a shard of glass struck him in the calf, causing him to tumble to the ground. He fell on top of Erin, but she was able to squirm out from under his weight, and despite the searing pain in his leg, he felt a wave of relief wash over him once he realized that she hadn't been hurt in the fall. "Daddy, get up," she cried, grabbing his hand and trying to help him to his feet. Before he could stand up, a large shard impaled him through the back, fastening him to the ground. He tried to yell for her to run, but all that came out of his mouth was a stream of bloody vomit, confirming that he was indeed gravely injured. Several other pieces of glass rained down on top of him, lacerating every remaining inch of his body. As he began to lose consciousness, he saw one of the people who had been playing volleyball, an attractive blonde woman in her early 20s, run out from under the pavilion, doing her best to protect herself. The woman picked up Erin, who was still screaming hysterically, and sprinted back toward cover. Her friends cheered her on and urged her to hurry up. Right before Dane took his last breath, he saw that they made it back to the pavilion, where they were embraced by a group of survivors who were huddled together. The woman who had bravely risked her life to save Erin's had only suffered minor lacerations during her rescue. The rain stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. By the time it was over, the death toll was in the thousands, as the event had impacted only in the park, but the entire town. Rescue workers made it to the scene to tend to the injured and remove the dead, and one EMT, a man who had seen more than his fair share of grisly scenes, made the comment that it was the worst thing he'd ever seen in his entire life. There was another who'd witnessed some of the worst accidents imaginable, who broke down into tears when she saw the countless bodies everywhere. The local media arrived on the scene as well, and it was only a matter of hours before the whole world was aware of the tragedy. Candlelight vigils were held across the globe, and churches everywhere were packed with strangers praying for both the victims and survivors of the horrible incident. Flags were hung at half-mast nationwide, and the president addressed the nation, declaring the day of the event a national day of mourning. In general, the entire country and most of the world was shocked and saddened by the occurrence. There was, however, at least one person happy about what had happened, and he was sure that he was going to make even more people equally pleased once he called in his report. He sat in a van on the side of the street, watching everything going on and smoking a cigarette. No one paid him any attention, so he was certain that he hadn't aroused any suspicion. He dialed his phone and wasn't surprised when his military contact picked up on the first ring. "Yes, sir. Project Reign of Terror was, without a doubt, a complete and total success," he said. "This method of attack has proven especially effective. Our nation's enemies will never know what hit them." "Yes, sir. I'm happy to hear that the President is satisfied with the results of our demonstration." He listened to the instructions that the contact on the other line gave him without saying another word, and then ended the call and drove away, eager for his next mission to begin. He felt a twinge of guilt when he thought about how he'd had a hand in all the death and destruction around him, but felt better once he told himself that it was all for the greater good. After all, Every weapon needed to be tested as successfully before being mass manufactured. In the big scheme of things, this was a small price to pay for freedom.